What does it mean to be healed in therapy? So a few years ago, I was playing basketball at the gym, and I remember I got a steal. And if you don't know me, I'm about 6'4". So I got a steal, and I was in the open court, and it was just me and one other guy going to the goal. And I remember going up to try to dunk on the guy, and he ends up blocking me. But when he blocks me, I lose my footing and I fall. And as I'm falling, I put my hand, specifically my left hand, down to try to brace my fall. And one of the worst things that could ever happened. I actually snapped my arm. Like literally, it snapped. I broke my arm, and it was by far one of the most excruciating pains that I've ever felt. I remember as soon as it happened, I knew that I broke my arm because it felt like someone was gripping my arm. Like it just went numb, if you will. And I remember screaming like, "Help! Help!" Someone call an ambulance. And it was a tough day. And the ambulance had to come, put me on a stretcher, and had to put a splint on my arm. And as they were putting that splint on my arm, man, it hurt like crazy, man. And they wheeled me out and they took me to the hospital and they said, yeah, you broke your arm. And, for about, I want to say maybe like 2.5, 3 months, I had to wear a cast on my arm in order for it to heal. And the thing about this part of my arm that I broke, I didn't break my ulna or my forearm. Like that part wasn't broken. It's actually the part of my arm where my bicep is. I actually broke that, and that's very rare for that part to break because it's a very hard bone. So what ended up happening is 2, 3 months go by. I'm wearing this sling, I'm wearing this cast, and eventually, over time, as you can imagine, my arm gets healed. But what's funny is that as my arm was healing, and even to this day, I can feel a little bump where I broke my arm, because where that bone broke, what ended up happening was that the calcium or the new bone started to form around the old bone to connect it. And now that it's connected, it actually, in some cases, some people would say it's actually stronger than what it was previously, because now it has this bone that's reinforcing it, if you will. So why am I telling you guys this, right? I'm telling you this because the way that my arm was healed is the same way that we in therapy see as being healed as well. My arm has, if you look at it from an x-ray, it had this little bump on it, right? On the bone, right? You'll see this abnormal deformity, if you will. And it's nothing crazy. Like my arm, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, like it's a regular arm, right? But when you look at it closely, there's a little bump there, and it still works just as if it's my right arm. It works just as well. Like the thing that a lot of people think is that being healed means that you're perfect or that you don't have any scars. And that's not the case, right? And that's why I think a lot of people, when they come to therapy, they're confused on what therapy is actually supposed to do. And I talk a little bit about this in episode 50 of this podcast, so you want to check that out. So what I'm trying to get you guys to see is that by having a true definition of what it means to be healed going into therapy, you're actually able to make gains a lot quicker than what you previously would have thought. Because now we're looking at therapy as not as a place to become perfect, or as I tell some of my clients, a place to delete your memories, to delete your past. That's not what it is, all right? Just like my arm now is fully healed, and if you've ever gotten a cut, broken a bone, tore a ligament, even if you've ever gone to the gym and just naturally tore down some muscle, right? Some muscle fibers, we all know that it grows back, right? And the scar is there, but it still works just as fine. And what I'm trying to say is that in order to live a life of fulfillment, a life of happiness, a life where you feel confident, you don't need to delete anything from your past. You don't need to judge yourself based on your ability to forget something. That's not the case. So I want to give you guys the real definition of what it means to be healed, and then I'm going to give you 3 reasons as to why that's the case. So what does it mean to be healed in therapy? It means you have an ability to live with your past instead of living without it. All right. It means living with your past instead of living without it. And by living with your past, what I mean is you're able to live with it in a meaningful way, meaning that despite your past, you're still able to, whether it's go out on dates, right, after being cheated on, or let's say start that business after you had your first one flop, right? Or being able to trust people after you've been abused in some type of way, cheated on, lied to. There's so many different things out there. But if you're able to do this, that is actually a definition of being healed. Because here's the thing that I see a lot of people think. They think, oh, I have to get rid of these thoughts. Or my past shouldn't whether it's bring up pain, bring up sadness, bring up anxiety, stress, whatever it is, like those things will happen, right? And I say that because again, we're under this assumption that if we do just meditate, or we do just go to therapy, or if we do just take medication, right, our past should no longer hurt us. And that's not the case. What I do as a therapist is I practice a lot of acceptance. And this means not just accepting the good feelings, right? And I shouldn't even say good feelings. It's more so the comfortable feelings versus the uncomfortable feelings. We have to find a place within ourselves to embrace them all. It's kind of like the weather. And I live here in South Florida, so we know it's sunshine most of the time, right? But occasionally it does rain. But when it rains, my day doesn't have to stop. And when it rains for you internally, your day doesn't have to stop either. And a lot of people, they've been living that way. It's where they only move when days are going well. They only move or take action when they see it all the way through. And that's not always going to be the reality of things. There's going to be times where it's a little foggy. There is some doubt. You may find yourself feeling sad. All these things, they're natural, guys. Very natural. And I want you to know that, again, you do not have to stop your life when these things come up. So the definition of being healed is being able to live with your past instead of trying to live life without your past. Because right now, a lot of people are trying to live life without their past, and they're doing that by smoking, drinking, essentially numbing themselves so they don't remember or feel anything from their past. And what that does is it takes you out of the right here, right now moments that are just so fulfilling and meaningful. Some people, unfortunately, would go as far as to even take their own lives in order to not feel this pain. But the question would be, did you really accomplish anything, right? Does taking your own life accomplish anything for you, right? What is the win there? Because at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose. It's a lose for you and it's a lose for the people around you. And that's not something that we need to do. We just need to simply change how we perceive, how we hold this pain, this sadness, these things from our past. So here are the 3 reasons why living with your past is a better definition of being healed instead of trying to live a life without it. So first, by deciding to live with your past, you're actually bringing all the valuable and meaningful things that comes with your pain. And what I mean by that is that your pain actually reminds you of the boundaries that you should be setting in your life moving forward. A great example of that is the pain of, let's say, staying in a relationship too long, or staying in a job for too long, or not being quick enough with changing your circumstances. Like whatever the case it may be, that pain is actually needed to remind you of who you should be moving forward, what boundaries you should set in your life right now, okay? Without this, we would be open, we would even subject ourselves to continuing to people please, to not have boundaries, to not be firm and assertive in our decision making. And that's something that can lead to a lifelong suffering, if you will. Now, something else I tell clients in my sessions is that by looking in your pain, you actually find the things that you value. Because by valuing something, naturally there will be pain whenever that value is not present. And by having pain, it also shows you that there's something in this world that you deeply care about. So I'm gonna pick a random value and I'm gonna show you guys exactly how your pain is connected to your values and how your values are connected to your pain. So one of the things that I deeply value is curiosity. And more specifically, I value curiosity when it comes to my career. Now, where the pain comes in is when I wasn't being curious. In other words, I was doing the same mundane task over and over and over again when I was working my job as a high school counselor. Each and every day, I was guaranteed to have a couple things. One of them was 100 emails a day, right? And that's crazy. That's very overwhelming as a school counselor. So 100 emails a day, probably like another like 10 to 20 phone calls, maybe like 3 or 4 voicemails, right? People constantly coming at my door asking me to change schedules. Like my day was very, very repetitive. And as a result, I felt like a robot, or I felt like another clog in a system. And it was very boring to me, to the point where it was, I hate to say it, but it's actually very like draining, very sad. And I say that hesitantly because there was nothing more that I wanted to be than to be a high school counselor, right? So that's where my pain came from. Now, something that I deeply enjoyed, it is being curious, but more specifically, it's learning new strategies within my business. And that's something that's very, very exciting because it helps me to see like how much better can I be as a therapist, as a coach, as an entrepreneur, as an online marketer, all these things. So it's kind of like I'm playing a basketball game, and I'm trying to see how do I increase my points per game. How do I increase, let's say, like the like my vertical jump and all these other like statistics within the overarching game. Like that's really what I'm trying to figure out, and it's very, very fun to see. So what I'm trying to show you is that your pain is actually a reminder. It sheds light on the things that you care about, and it's not something that we just want to throw away and forget. It's kind of like the idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we try to forget our past. The second reason why being healed means living with your past instead of trying to forget about it is that by living with your past and being able to share those stories, it actually inspires other people who've been down a similar path to actually overcome the things that they're going through. So I'll give you a great example. So there have been times where, whether it's entrepreneurs, pastors, even counselors like myself, they've gone through a lot of things in their life that has actually led them to the careers that they're currently in. Something that I struggled with a lot growing up was my confidence. It's something that I struggled with, and a lot of it came from playing basketball, to be honest. I just wasn't the most confident person. And by seeing that, it told me that this is an area that I personally want to work on, but it's also something that I want to help other people do as well. And by being able to show people that, hey, I have this part of my life where I wasn't confident, but now I was able to find that confidence within myself, it shows people who also don't feel confident that there's a path to becoming more confident, if you will. There's so many other stories. I think one of the biggest stories that I can think of at this moment was the story of the lady who was beaten up. I think she may have been abused in Central Park. And this is probably back in like the 1990s. And there's a movie on Netflix about this. But the lady who was, unfortunately like beat up and, almost lost her life, she actually took that moment and she made a book out of it. And she basically is now helping people who have gone through tough things, whether it's abuse or what have you. And she's helping and specifically as women, she's helping other women to live a life beyond their past, beyond their pain. There's also another story about a guy, and I can't remember his name, but there's a guy who was on the Golden State Bridge, I believe it was, and he ends up jumping off the Golden State Bridge because he wanted to kill himself. And when he landed, he broke, I think, both of his legs. I think he probably had maybe like a fractured rib or something like that. And he almost drowned. But what ended up happening is that there was a dolphin that actually picked him up out of water and helped him to stay afloat until, the police and the ambulance was able to pull him out of the water. He goes around to this day telling that story to people who are currently going through depression, people that are currently thinking about taking their own lives. He talks to them, he tells them he was once them, he was once in their shoes, and he's inspiring them to live a life beyond this moment, beyond this part of their life, right? Like that is what it means to be healed. I'll even give you another example. So even in AA meetings and NA meetings, so this is Alcoholics Anonymous and in Narcotics Anonymous, so people that are struggling with addictions. One of the most powerful things about these groups is that people who have 20 years, 30 years of being sober are able to come in and share their story with people who only have maybe 5 days of sobriety. By hearing these stories, it encourages and inspires them, right, to actually take the next step in the 12-step program or whatever steps you need in order to, again, overcome what it is that you need to overcome. So I'll wrap up this second point by saying something that I've heard in church before. You cannot have a testimony without a test, okay? You cannot have a testimony without some sort of test, all right? And what I'm trying to tell you is that your past, it actually serves as an inspiration to not only yourself, but to others. And the third one, and I kind of alluded to this one earlier, the mind, unfortunately, doesn't have a delete button. So the fact that the mind has this ability to not only remember things, but to also make relations to other things shows how futile it is to try to change your thoughts, suppress your thoughts, or for some people, try to smoke or drink your thoughts away. I always tell people, hey, if you can forget your mom's name within a week of our next session, I give you $1,000. And that's something they don't even try to take me up on because they know they can't forget their mom's name, right? Or try to forget, let's say, their best friend's name or the very first car they drove or even the car they currently drive. Some of these things are just kind of your everyday things, right? Something that you don't really think too much about, but yet we can't forget them. So if you've ever been, let's say, unfortunately, like sexually abused, right? Something that's very tough for a lot of people to deal with. That is going to be very hard for you to just forget, right? And also, I'll even add this because I've seen this with some of my other clients. A lot of people aren't healed because they're waiting for someone else to give them the green light. What I mean by that is there are some people who are waiting for an apology from someone that they're never going to get, whether that person is alive or dead. Something that's very tough for us as humans to do is to accept, whether we call it blame, or to accept being wrong, or to accept that we've done something wrong. And the reason why is because we're trying to protect this self-concept of who we believe ourselves to be, right? Who wants to be known as someone that has done something wrong? No one, right? We don't want to feel that feeling. So because of that, a lot of people are not willing to apologize for their wrongdoings. So if you're waiting for someone to say, I'm sorry, then you may be waiting for a lifetime. So the mind, again, as I was saying, it doesn't have a delete button, and I don't even want you to try to delete these things from your past. Use it as a stepping stone to whether it's to inspire yourself, inspire others, or again, to show you what it is that you deeply value. So instead of trying to forget it, try to find out, how do I live with this pain? How do I carry it with me? And also, I'll add something else too, just because you made it this far in the podcast. Something I tell my clients is when your pain does show up, stop and notice what else is present, like right here, right now, in addition to the pain. Because when that pain shows up, you do not disappear. You are still there. A question that I had my client write down and ask himself during the week was, when sadness shows up, where does John Doe go, right? And I'm just using an alias, as you can imagine. So when sadness shows up, where does Kate go? When sadness shows up, where does Eric go? When sadness shows up, where do you go? Because you're still there. You're still there just as you were there yesterday and the day before. Nothing has changed except the emotions that you're feeling. So I need you to see that you can still live a life beyond this pain. And when I say beyond it, I really mean living life with it. So again, the definition of being healed is being able to live with your past instead of trying to live a life without your past. Because to try to live a life without your past, it'll rob you of all the value that does come with your pain. And again, here are the 3 reasons why living with your past is a better definition of being healed instead of trying to live a life without it. So first, there's actually some moments in your life that are painful, yes, but it also serves as a reminder of the boundaries that you should be setting and the values that you personally have. Second, your past, your traumas, the tough things that you go through, it actually serves as an inspiration to others, but also to yourself, to show that life does not have to stop every time sadness or thoughts of your past comes up, or even if tough things in the future comes your way. That doesn't mean that your life has to stop. And by telling your story, it actually helps you to move closer to your story, right? So to be more open and accepting of it. But again, it allows other people to hear it and be inspired. Remember, there is no test without a testimony. And then third, the mind does not have a delete button. That is just a fact. So because we cannot delete our minds, we need to find another way to deal with our past. And it doesn't involve smoking, drinking, drugging yourself to death, or anything like that. All right. And also remember, do not wait around for an apology. Stop giving people the green light, or stop waiting for people to give you the green light in order to allow yourself to be quote unquote healed. Okay. So this is Coach Wells. Do me a big favor. Leave a comment below. That way I can respond to it. And we can kind of go back and forth and really build a relationship through these podcasts. All right, guys. I'll see you later.